Blog Talk Radio.
We're gonna have a TV party tonight. Alright! We're gonna have a TV party, alright! Tonight! We've got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews. Everybody's gonna hang out here tonight. Alright! We'll pass out on the couch. Alright! Tonight! We got nothing better to do than watch TV and have a couple of brews. Don't talk about anything else. We don't want to know. We're dedicated to our favorite shows.
And tonight our favorite show continues to be Fuller House. This time, Season 3. Welcome to TV Party Tonight. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And joining me to discuss Fuller House Season 3, brought to you by Netflix, is my good friend and often co-host of TV Party Tonight, Mr. Pat Mullin. How do you do, sir?
Come on now, stop it. Cut it out. Quit it.
How rude. How you doing?
Doing well, Mark. I've been looking forward to this show. This has become old hat for us. As soon as a Fuller House season pops out, you and I jump on and then watch it as soon as we can and do these shows for them. And it's a lot of fun to just kind of do this, and I enjoy it, and the listeners apparently enjoy it too. So as long as you guys want it, we'll keep giving it to you.
Well, you know, I just did a TV party for Ozark, and you know, I tend to keep to the serious, dramatic type stuff. So it's fun to it's fun to talk about a silly show like Fuller House, which I think Netflix does a pretty good job with. We were talking before the show started proper about how some of the cast members seem a lot more comfortable with their roles, and they're having fun with them, and the show itself has taken on a different air. And so as a viewer, I'm having more fun with the show. I think in a lot of ways, Season 3 is superior to both 1 and 2. I mean, you and I talked about with the first season how it felt like all right, everyone take a drink. I'm about to make a wrestling reference. It felt like one of those matches where no story was being told, but everyone had to get their shit in, and it was just a series of high spots. For those of you
goddamn, what the fuck? They're running off the damn ropes and they don't sell a goddamn thing. Fuck that.
Exactly, Jim Cornette. And so, you know, you and I had talked about how a little frustrating it was, but the show found its groove after a couple of episodes. By Season 3, the season we're going to talk about tonight, everyone seems very settled. And everyone's got their role, and they're telling a couple of different stories, and it doesn't seem as like I said, everyone's got to get their shit in. They're also less reliant on the old cast. You know, you and I were talking before. I think Danny Tanner only makes one episode appearance. John Stamos alternating between their character and their real life names. Bob Saget makes one appearance. Dave Coulier makes one appearance. Him and his terrible children. John Stamos makes an appearance. The gal that plays his wife makes one appearance, and that's it. Over 9 episodes, you get 4 of them have one guest appearance by one cast member, and that's it. Which I liked. You know, and as a starting place to talk about this season, it goes to the fact that they have a strong enough cast now that they don't need to rely on John Stamos and company to prop them up.
You know, it's funny. I'm a huge Knight Rider fan, the original Knight Rider. Loved it, have collectibles of it. We'll watch it, randomly when it's on TV, rerunning at a certain point. If I just happen to see it's on, I will stop what I'm doing and watch it. They came out with a new Knight Rider a couple of years ago, probably about close to 10 years ago at this point. And there was very little touching the old show with it other than Hasselhoff being this guy's father and appearing in it briefly. No William Daniels, no Devin, et cetera, et cetera. When you don't recapture the elements of the old show for the new generation or for the old generation, a lot of it's just lost and people get resentment towards it. Why are you calling it this when there's almost nothing going on with this? There's a new One Day at a Time that literally has no connection to the original show. This show tried its hardest to make its viewers of its predecessor happy by acknowledging the past characters and the relationships and everything. And it's done a really good job of building off of that without relying on that to make the show happen.
I also like that they're not just bringing them in for the shits and giggles of it, that there's a story to be told with each of their appearances, or they do something other than show up. It isn't a matter of, Dave Coulier walks on screen and is like, I'm Dave Coulier, and hi, Dave Coulier, and then proceeds to walk off screen again. I keep using him because he actually, I think, has the best appearance, where they told a story in the second season about him and his terrible children, and they continued that story and actually addressed the primary issue with him and those kids. They did it in a silly way, and they sort of kept to the idea that Dave Coulier is still a pushover parent, who has a difficult time disciplining his awful children. But at least there was continuity there, which I liked. John Stamos and Rebecca Romaine Stamos had adopted a child towards the end of season 2. You actually
not Rebecca Romaine Stamos.
Oh, sorry. What's her actual name?
She's not.
Shit.
Lori Loughlin. Rebecca Romaine Stamos is now Rebecca Romaine O'Connell.
Okay. Whoops. Her actually show up with the kid twice, and continue to tell that story. So, it was good. And the appearance by Bob Saget, he plays a role in that particular with the pie eating and all of that. But you have all these various relationships having difficulties, and he's there to sort of remind them, hey, you have to talk to each other. This doesn't work. And he's absolutely right. This doesn't work when you're just arguing and not communicating with one another. So I liked all that. But let's talk a little bit about our season opener here, which is entirely reliant on the cast. And I'll tell you, I don't know how I feel about musical numbers. In some cases, I think they're fun. In other cases, I'm kind of like, all right, can we get to the storytelling here and stop with the silliness? And I like the fact that this was almost a parody of musical numbers. They did a full one, and a lot of people in this cast cannot sing for shit. It was a little bit of the cracking voices, and a couple of them were a little off key. But it felt like at the end of it, they were making fun of the whole idea of musical numbers after they had just done a full one. So that made me laugh. What did you think of the musical opener? It was the best summer ever.
I'm perfectly happy and content with it. It was not meant to be anything more than what you described it as. They're not trying to pretend this is some, Glee knockoff where everybody can sing pitch perfect and dance. No, this was very self-aware, and as a result, I think it's a lot more enjoyable.
You and I, let's talk about the cast here. I said everyone seems a little bit more relaxed with their parts. They're pretty well established now after 2 seasons. One of the things you and I mentioned, and I want to talk about him specifically.
Oh, boy.
We talked about it before the show. Elias, oh, gosh, what's his name? Elias Harger. So you and I talked about how previously he just seemed to be yelling at the camera. And he was doing the, Dot from Animaniacs. I'm cute. And that was kind of it to his character.
Just
his
wait,
acting
folks. There's a
ability.
left hook coming behind this.
It just seemed to be limited to, I'm going to scream my lines of the character and then smile and show my dimples. And as season 1 progressed to season 2, they started to make him a little bit more effeminate, but they didn't necessarily go full Stewie from Family Guy. And I'll tell you, the arc of this character followed Stewie, where I mention him because in the beginning, Stewie was just a genius who wanted to kill his mom, and then they started adding little effeminate or homosexual twists to him, but it was just little snippets here and there. And then over the course of 15, 16 seasons or whatever, they have pretty much gone and made him fully gay. There was constant jokes about him being a homosexual baby, which, if you're a fan of Family Guy, is funny, and if you don't know anything about Family Guy, you're hearing that and going, what the hell? But that's the show for you. Well, they're following the same arc with poor Elias Harger here, who started off with, he's a little effeminate, but, that just may be the way he's being directed, or, that's just how he's coming across. To this season, he has gone full Stewie. He's just the way he stands, his delivery of the lines. He's just so over the top of feminine to the point where it's distracting.
I'm thinking of all the hate response we're going to get for talking about a little boy who's gay, or at least we believe to be gay at this point. Not Elias Harger himself, but the character of Max. They basically, what we talked about, they have one caveat to kind of convince you, okay, maybe he's not, because they gave him a little girlfriend character last season who appears this season too. And Mark, do your little bit again. Please sing.
It's the best summer ever.
No, what song you were singing after we brought up the girlfriend character, who I nonchalantly referred to as the world's youngest beard.
Oh, damn it, you put me on the spot. I don't remember what I was singing.
Not a liver spot. Not just any spot. Not a spot like your dog spot. Not any spot, but my spot. Sorry, you set me up and I had to take it. Mark.
Fair enough.
I'm not actually gay. I'm not actually gay. I'm not actually gay.
Okay. Yeah. Who's got a case of the not gays? Which,
yes.
If you don't know what that is a reference to Red Letter Media's Half in the Bag, where they were talking about, specifically they were talking about Chris Pine's, Captain Kirk from the new Star Trek movies, where it's like they have to make him like having sex with all these various women so as to not make him come across as gay. And they do the same thing with Spock. So as to not make him come across as gay, they made sure that they gave him a girlfriend. Yeah, so and thus they came up with the phrase, who's got a case of the not gays.
And so that's what they've done to this 7-year-old. They made sure he has a case of the not gays by giving him a girlfriend character that in one, and this kind of counteracts the argument, but he has a diary that he writes in, and at one point talks about the future and marrying her. However, since that is written in a diary, anything is fair game.
and it's not like, let me be clear, I am not insinuating anything in terms of sexual preference per se. His portrayal of Max, Elias Harger's portrayal of Max, just comes across as extremely effeminate. I mean, he stands with he has a sassy way of standing.
Yes, very animated hand gestures, and not like in an Italian old school sense.
No, he's like standing with like his hip out and his hand on his hip. It's just ridiculous. And it was like, as a director, how do you let that happen unless that's what you're going for? And I have to ask, why?
I think honestly, I'm not thrown by the fact that the director may in fact be going for that, because Rich Carell has directed the bulk of this season and has directed just over half the episodes that have come out of this show. And if you look at his directorial history, he worked on the original Full House. He worked on Perfect Strangers, The Hogan Family, which stars Jason Bateman, star of Ozarks, cheap plug for your last TV party, Step by Step, Family Matters. This type of show is not new ground for him by any means. So, and he's directed tons of child actors before without any type of, issue or something along those lines. But so I have to imagine they're really trying to get him to be an effeminate character, if not a perpetually at some point a homosexual character. Again, the standing with the hips out to the side with one hand on the hip, the almost pigeon-toed kind of stepping, the various multicolored boy preacher outfits. And you said it gets to the point where it's distracting because it's taking away from whatever the narrative is, because you're like, they're really making this kid really teeter a fine line. And I gave you the example of, for anybody who's a fan of Curb Your Enthusiasm, there was an episode that was the season 9 finale where Larry was dating a woman who had a very young son, probably about the same age as Max in this show, who came across as being gay. And that was one of the long-running jokes in that episode when Larry got him a sewing machine for his birthday, and he loved it. And for those who want the example, go on YouTube, look up the video Greg the Flamboyant Kid, and one quote summarizes it perfectly. Either this kid is the greatest actor since Pacino, or he's actually gay.
I have to say, he's also, to a very small degree, almost microscopic, he's less annoying this season than he was in the previous 2 seasons.
He's not yelling, and that's a plus.
Yeah. He's a tad more subdued, but it was just like what they made up for in turning him down, they turned up in the sass. Another character who's as they've gone Stewie with Elias Harger, they seem to have started to go Homer Simpson with Michael Campion, who plays Jackson, because originally they just made him, I'm looking at the Wikipedia entry for his character, his mischievous 13-year-old son who often engages in reckless stunts. They seem to have pulled away from that more and made him somewhat of a meathead. This season, they made him dumber for some odd reason. Which you might hear that and think, well, it runs counter to his storyline where he, where he has to go back to summer school to fix his history grade from a D to what ends up, I think, becoming an A after a fact. But despite that, they gave him friends who are all morons. And they continually made him out to be a moron. And it was like, this is what happened to Homer Simpson, where he started off as just an angry dad, and over the seasons has become, more and more retarded. They also did that with Peter Griffin. Peter Griffin started out as, just a New England dad who was supposed to be like a stereotype of a TV dad. And they've fully admitted he's like borderline retarded now on the show. And for some weird reason, that's the direction they decided to take with the Jackson character.
I'm not hating it, though, and I think he's doing it well. They're portraying him, and poor Michael Campion is at that stage of puberty where you get very lurchy and awkward, and your voice doesn't sound right in a lot of ways. And the poor guy's having to live it on Netflix to millions of people. So I think, they kind of tried different directions with his character for the first 2 years. They tried where he was kind of the atypical, mischievous, older sibling, ne'er-do-well, kind of like, which we've seen in plenty of sitcoms before. Like the best one I always remember is Mike Seaver, Kirk Cameron as just the mischievous, ne'er-do-well older brother who doesn't really figure it out until much later on in life. And that's kind of a stereotype, the same way the jockey older sibling would be, who maybe isn't the sharpest knife in the drawer, but is either a football player or a wrestler of some kind or some type of athlete. In this sense, they've kind of dropped that because they knew that they've already portrayed him as clumsy, accident-prone, and not very tough. So they're now just going into full, dullard mode with him. And he plays it very well. A lot of his delivery on these lines is just really accurate. Like when they talk about him and his posse of less than intellectual friends from summer school are having a discussion about Abraham Lincoln, and when one of them refers to him as the guy who started that job website, and another character from him says, "No, that's LinkedIn," and Jackson gives the history of Lincoln, Jackson just replies, "No, that doesn't sound right."
Yeah, I actually got a good couple of laughs out of him this season. He also came across less annoying. They had one or two lines throughout the 9 episodes where he was like, "Oh, I'm J Money," and then it was like, "No, you're not." And he's like, "You're right, I'm not." And it was like quickly acknowledging you don't pull off suave at all. They made him a little bit more sincere, but they started to make him a bit of a dummy. And you're right, it works. It was an interesting choice for him. I mentioned to you before we went on air tonight that Sonny Nicole Bringas, who plays Ramona Gibbler, really looked like this is the most I've enjoyed her character this season, because they stopped making her seemingly hate everyone in the cast, and it really looked like she was having fun with Andrea Barber this time. Like the scenes they have together, it just looks like she's having a great time. There's a lot of dancing going on, and it was just like here, this is what we're gonna make you guys do, and she's just like, this is wonderful. She's clearly a talented dancer, and that's kind of what they gave her to do this season, other than some of the stuff with Popko, who thankfully only makes one appearance this entire season, maybe 2. I think he might have been in the laser tag sequence. But in any case, which I actually want to talk about with reference to Andrea Barber. But, it looked like she is more comfortable in the role now and more comfortable with the two people who play her parents, with those two actors. And it makes for viewing her a lot more enjoyable.
I really enjoyed the interplay she has, not even just with Andrea Barber as Kimmy, but I enjoy her with Fernando too. And there's really only 2 times I can deal with Fernando on my screen. One is when he's having his rivalry with Max, and the other is seeing his interaction with Ramona, because I think they play off of each other really well. And I think even though he's extremely annoying through most of his appearances, when he gets engaged with the kids, it comes off really well. And particularly him in that fatherly role where he gets to drop a lot of the goofy absurdity of his character and gets to be this loving dad, I think that shows very well. And I think she tends to bring it out of him in a lot of respects. I think she got to be more her own character this year than as kind of the sister that Jackson and Max never had and a plot device in a lot of their antics. She got her own light to shine in a lot of respects, and I think it worked well.
I actually really enjoyed Juan Pablo Dipachi as Fernando this season. I think my favorite bit of his, and we're jumping around a lot, but I wanted to talk about the characters first before we discuss the plot elements. But my favorite part of him this season, and you're right, his stuff with Max is always very funny. But he moves out seemingly thinking that Andrea Barber and Sonny Nicole are going to follow him, and Andrea Barber flat out says, "Nope, I like it here and I'm not leaving, and you should have asked me before you did any of this," which again we'll talk about a little ways down the line. But so part of it is now his family is still living in the Fuller home, and so he keeps coming back over because he's lonely, even though he's living with Jimmy Gibbler. So there's a bit where it's almost Scooby-Doo-ish, where he's running around the house and DJ is chasing him and trying to find him and trying to get him to leave. And he's like hiding under the bed and he's running across the hall when she leaves. And I actually enjoyed the shit out of that. I thought, as goofy as a character as he is, that he made work.
I definitely saw improvements in what they did with him, and I don't want to bag on the portrayal so much as the writing of the character. I think, to be fair to Juan Pablo de Paz, who plays him, I think they wrote him as a one-note joke for a lot of season 1, did very little expansion on it in season 2, other than when he got to be Ricky Ricardo for Halloween, because that played out really well. And this season, I still didn't necessarily enjoy him so much as tolerated him. I think the more goofier, surrealistic elements of the show this year are almost exclusively tied to him. So I can kind of pass on that stuff. Almost the same way during the original run of the show when it got in later years. And, writers start running out of ideas. They took Dave Coulier's character and made him more of just an actual complete buffoon, to the point where he wasn't enjoyable on any level, and you just wanted to hit him.
The last character I want to bring up is a reoccurring guest character who takes the place of Lola. They use Lola for one episode where her and Jackson break up, and well, they are not boyfriend and girlfriend per se. She basically acts in that role. She's Jackson's study partner. He meets her in summer school. And she's actually the daughter of another reoccurring character, the chick who was in the band with Stephanie and DJ.
Yes, Gia, her former junior high school best frenemy who constantly got her into trouble.
Yeah. So Landry Bender plays Rocky, who is Gia's daughter. And I'll tell you, for the little bit that she has to do in this season, I really enjoyed the shit out of her. I especially liked her in the episode where she sleeps over, because in the little bit that they gave her to do in that episode, you can see her, seeing where how Jackson's family interacts, and being a little jealous and being kind of hurt that her mother just sort of dumps her there and is clearly, giving the milk away for free per se. I thought the Tinder joke was a little risque for a show like this, to be perfectly honest with you. But be that as it may, she's not given a lot, but she makes the most of her screen time. And I generally don't enjoy characters like hers, who plays the angry goth, who is sardonic and sarcastic and just an utter pill to deal with on screen. She took those elements and made them enjoyable. I have to give Landry Bender, who is a Disney Channel regular, has been in a number of different shows, both as a voiceover actress and a on-screen actress. She did a hell of a job, and she is a welcome addition to the cast.
And it's funny, we talked about her right before the show aired. I didn't place her in anything, didn't look at her. Apparently she's done a lot of work with Disney, but the role I would know her in is she played the little girl named Blythe in The Sitter with Jonah Hill from 2011, a role where she was really good in at that young age. I think at that point in time she may have been 11 years old, 10 years old, and her comedic timing was excellent. She got a very awkward, difficult character to play for, this little girl who's going through a celebutante phase, as they called it. And she was one of the high points of that movie. Not that it's high art by any means, mind you, but it was fun, and she was a big part of it. And so when I found that out, I'm really not surprised how well she took to this character. And even though she's not given a lot, there were layers there. There was, the outsider kind of looking for some kind of acceptance within the group of dullards from summer school. There was seeing her experience what not necessarily a real family is like, but a family unit, a nuclear family unit, and how they react with each other and how they are around each other versus growing up in a house with Gia as her mother, which you can only assume based on the character's past and how she's presented in this show, is not an entirely wholesome environment.
The last character I want to mention really quick, and it's really just a flyby here, but it bears paying attention to. Deshelle and Fox Mezet, who play Tommy Fuller, they take turns because of child labor laws and such. They really made good use out of the baby. I mean, they really made excellent use out of the baby. The baby gets a lot of funny one-liners. I mean, there's only so much you can do with an infant. But I'll tell you, the camera loves that child, and the child loves the camera. There's children, rather, love the camera. The little bits that they gave to those two kids, I thought were really funny. And again, kudos to the director for being able to do that with a pair of infants. Toddlers, I guess, in this case, kids walking around now. But I really enjoyed that. I mean, the first two seasons, again, there's not a whole lot you could do with the child. He's just sort of there as an ornament. This time, they really made use of that character for some gags, which is, again, all you can ask of the poor children. I
think that they're already outdoing the Olsen twins at the same point in time in their lives, so kudos to Dashel and Fox Messett. I think keep going, boys. You're doing just fine.
And stay off the drugs. All right, so let's switch gears here. I don't have a whole lot to say about Candace Cameron, Jodie Sweetin, or Andrea Barber, other than Andrea Barber was definitely more toned down this season than she was in the previous two. And we had talked about she was like the highlight of the last two seasons. She's more subdued this time, and I think that's because you have other characters who are sort of, being turned up. You can't have every character on 10. It just becomes a cacophony of nonsense. It becomes the first episode of season one. So I can see the need for that. Jodie Sweetin probably has the least to do of the main characters, and this is actually a good transition into the plot elements. This is very much Candace Cameron Bure's show. This is the DJ Tanner Fuller show. This is really about her figuring out whom she loves. Is it Steve or is it Matt? I have the name right?
Yes.
Okay. Is it Steve or is it Matt? And that is a story element. That is an arc that has followed from the very first episode. Who does she love? Where we left off with season 2 begins with she was going to tell Steve that she was going to choose. Well, the end of season 1 is she's told choose. You can't date both guys. And she says, I choose me. I have to figure out what I want first before I can make any kind of decision. And they open up season 2 with she's going to choose Steve. And as it turns out, he's dating CJ, who is, no frills DJ. I thought was kind of amusing. And she ends up dating Matt. And that follows all the way into season 3, where she loves Matt, but there's still a twinge of doubt. And the first time you start to see trouble in River City is where they do karaoke, and Steve and DJ have a thing. They both do the bit from Grease, which I really enjoyed. The whole karaoke sequence between Livin' La Vida Loca and Grease. I laughed pretty hard at some of that, and I really enjoyed, as far as musical numbers go, I enjoyed both sequences, and I did enjoy Gia's line about, I leave, you're doing La Vida Loca. I come back, you're doing La Vida Loca. You guys have a problem. But be that as it may, the whole thing that carries a lot of this is DJ still unsure if she should be with Matt or not. And, that leads to a dress fitting episode where she accidentally tries on CJ's dress, and there's a big misunderstanding. And then it goes to the end of the series, a series cliffhanger, which is unbeknownst to her. She ends up telling Steve that she was going to choose him and that she should have chosen him and that it's too late now, and she's afraid that they're going to end up being with the wrong people. I'm going to go ahead and pitch it over to you. What did you, as far as this particular season goes, and her having some thoughts about Steve dating Matt and still internally struggling with who the hell should she be with? What did you think of this season and how it kept that story going?
I think it's actually presented well. I think it avoids a lot of standard traps that you see in this instance where, I was a big fan of a TV show called My Two Dads. And the narrative of the show, obviously, is that the girl's mother was a skank, slept with these two guys, and it's indiscriminate who the father of young Nicole could be. And just like her mother had Joey and Michael pursuing her, Nicole has two boys constantly pursuing her, and she can't decide whether she wants to be with one or the other. Whereas I think this one has a more realistic perspective, and I don't doubt whoever the lead writer was on this, that they've been in a situation where they had to break up with somebody, never really got closure on it completely, or still had feelings left over, dated somebody else who was great, had no issue with them, but you can't reconcile those feelings completely with the person you aren't with. And as a result, there's always a constant inner monologue. Am I doing the right thing? Am I truly happy with this person who makes me happy at times? But then I see this person and I get all stirred up again, and there's obviously they go a step further in the sitcom by complicating it with matters like DJ accidentally trying on CJ's wedding dress, the summer lovin' karaoke between the two of them where there's clearly a little bit of a spark there still. Steve stopping by on his late night donut run, and all these little instances that don't happen in real life other than the karaoke one, but just to further push matters. And then we get the big climax of this half of season 3, where on the plane to Japan for Steve's destination wedding, DJ makes her confession about choosing Steve initially and thinking she's talking to her sister when in reality it's Steve who's hearing all this on the way to his wedding.
I really enjoyed it, and it's I enjoy the Matt character, and I especially liked in the lead up to the plane sequence. They're still doing the Team Steve, Team Matt bit, and Matt's at first made to look like he doesn't have any of the attributes that make Steve the one that DJ should be with, and then he turns around and he does have all those things. So they keep you guessing. Where is this going?
Yeah, when they had him with, remembering everything DJ said to him and taking the liberty of doing all these things ahead of time for her, it's like even if, and there is a pretty loyal Team Steve, Team Matt following this show, even if you're Team Steve, you have to look at that and be like, wow, you know what? That's pretty darn good. I don't know that she shouldn't be with this guy. And it's just really doing a good job of not making the narrative predictable, not forcing you to lean one way or the other, and I really enjoy that part of it. And again, I think it's a tough spot to be in, to not, as an actress, to not show favoring, either Matt or Steve. And I think Candace does a really good job at that. And this is somebody who's not been seen as anybody but DJ Tanner, no matter what she did in her career, which was a lot of Hallmark movies and that ilk, and kind of took a time out from acting to be a mom. But I think just the fact that she's matured as a person since we saw her as DJ is factored into the role she's playing now really well. And she's even grown in that role over the past 3 seasons, which I think is really noticeable this year more than any other.
Does it mean, or did she get more attractive this season? I know she's an adult, but, and she couldn't have changed all that much in 3 seasons. But I just feel like she got hotter this season. Maybe it's the way they're dressing her. Maybe it's because she's got a tan. But like Jodie Sweetin was the one who everyone was like, ooh, Jodie Sweetin, but they continually dress her in curtains and tarps, and these long flowing things, and she spent half of the season in a cast, on crutches, so you never really get to see her body. And I'm not trying to be piggish about this, but that was the rub on this show is, ooh, we're gonna get to see Jodie Sweetin post drug addiction, and she's got these huge boobs. So it'll be fantastic. And the one who's the most attractive on the show and just keeps getting hotter for some weird reason, at least in my crazy opinion, is Candace Cameron Bure. Like, she's gorgeous. And I don't... And
she would probably give the credit to her personal trainer who she loves and is constantly posting videos with on Instagram. I definitely think she's kind of dressing a little bit more young adult and less like a mom. I think she's wearing her hair a little bit differently than, she had it tied up a lot prior, and she's kind of letting it down and having it really like layered and looking good. And she's just, she's just like fine wine, man. She gets better with age. She's a beautiful, beautiful lady and always has been, but really just she's doing something this year that's making her stand out. And whether it's just the change from mom to wow, see what I did there? Whether it's that change or, maybe that there's less focus on Jodie Sweetin and her very statuesque, voluptuous physique because she's constantly in tarps, as you pointed out, and in a cast for half a season. Maybe that's just a natural, more attention focused her way. I just think she's always been an attractive lady, and she's kind of just letting it see through more because this season is less about, her as the mother and matriarch of this family and more about her trying to get her own life in a certain amount of order based on the Matt Steve conflict, etc. And I think as a result, she's kind of feeling her oats a little bit and dressing younger and looking younger, and good for you, Candace. Rock it.
Indeed. Looking forward to the next 9 episodes and getting a good stare at her. One of the plot elements that they started with, even as far back as I think it's season 1, is that Stephanie Tanner can't have kids. She's barren or whatever. And this, seemingly out of the blue and with no connection to anything else happening, they put forth this subplot where she's pushed to go get a second opinion, and she's told, with the help of a surrogate, if you get on this now, you might be able to have a kid. You've still got some viable eggs. You're just not, but you're going to have to do it through like artificial insemination. And so the whole family says they're going to pitch in and help her, which I happen to know somebody who's gone through not 1, but 2, but I think they're on round 3 of IVF. And yeah, it's like thousands of dollars to do this. It is not cheap. But in the world of these Full House characters, the whole family is going to pitch in and help this happen. And in the last episode, Jimmy jumps on the plane and says, please let me be the donor. Let me be the child's father. I want to have a family with you. And she just sort of, like, all right, quit twisting my arm about it already. Sort of gives in and says, okay, I want to have a family with you too. Is there any, now you like my wife tend to be up on like the Hollywood gossip and some of the backstories on these things. Is there any particular reason why they would have written this in? Is there something going on with Jodie Sweetin? Like, is she really pregnant?
I don't think so. And if she is, I haven't heard anything about it. She tends not to be, thankfully, the gossip fodder that she was when she was in the throes of addiction. I don't know if this is necessarily a way where they're thinking of, we kind of want to wind the show down or something along those lines and give it a happy ending, or maybe this is a way to write out a character at a certain point. Like maybe things don't work with Jimmy and they write him out. I can't tell you anything on the real life side of that, but I can tell you that to me this feels a little forced. And I don't necessarily dig the dynamic it's going in that sense. finding out that she couldn't have children was a good element to add to her character. And unless this is, and this is going to sound very cold, but unless this is headed for a payoff where you find out, even with surrogacy, your eggs aren't really any good and I can't do it, and she goes through some sort of character arc with it, I don't think there's a good payoff coming to it. That's just me.
I actually don't like the way they wrote her story this season. It's the one thing about season 3 I was not pleased with, because she started in with season 2 with, I'm going to get back into music. That's going to be my thing. And I understand she's there to watch the baby during the day when DJ's at work. That's the whole point of her being there. I mean, Andrea Barber was there because she was leaving Fernando at the time and she needed support. She wasn't necessarily there to help DJ with the kids, though she can. Stephanie was the one that was moving back, coming home from London. She apparently had been some sort of a successful DJ in Europe, and she was coming home to help with the kids in the aftermath of the father dying. The same premise as the original Full House. And in season 2, she's like, I have no money and nothing to do other than watch your baby. I'm going to get back into music, and they briefly reform the band, and she writes The Boy Next Door, which they play off of a little bit in this season, which is all fine. But instead of continuing her quest to become a musician again, they seem to have summarily dropped it. They kept saying she was broke and that everything had stalled, and now she wants to have a kid. And I'm looking at this going, how does this add up? It was, like I said, it just seemingly came out of nowhere and was connected to nothing.
Yeah, they really, it was never hinted at. It was never, there was never a seed planted about it. They addressed it in the first season. Great, cool. Not a word about it in the second season at all. This was just dropped, and the drive went to her trying to get back into music. Great. Season 3, other than the one instance where she had sold apparently a song to a movie, and they used about 10 seconds of it, and that was it, and she was disappointed over that. They just kind of pull this thing out of thin air to do that. And I don't know if maybe it was reactionary by people who were upset about that happened to her character and they shouldn't do that. And they said everything needs to be happy or what have you. And to me, that takes away from things a little bit, because I think the one thing this definitely had over its predecessor is that it was getting and shifting a little bit more reality-based in terms of its storytelling, especially with Stephanie not being able to have children. That was the big one. And now that they've gone and basically retconned that out of existence, the fact that if she gets on it now, she can do this with surrogacy. Like I said, unless we're looking for a payoff where either her eggs aren't good or she doesn't find that window in time, I don't see a positive result coming of this. You're going to add another baby to the show, more cast. And I know that the first show had a ton of characters involved. Particularly, you won't find oftentimes a larger main cast featured in every episode in Full House. But that's a really hard balance to make work. And even towards the end of that show, as I pointed out, they really didn't make it work all that well. And I'm afraid of this show veering that same course.
Yeah, I just don't like the story. Like I said, I like the fact that everything built. The last thing I want to talk about before we end tonight is, again, at least it's a continuation of a set story and not something that just came out of left field. And I don't know what they're going to do with the next 9 episodes with it, if anything at all. But it was one of those like, huh? When I saw it, the stuff with the Gibbler family. Fernando was a guest character in the first season. He moves in the second season as he's trying to patch things up with Andrea Barber, who's Kimmy Gibbler, and then in this season he decides he's going to buy the Gibbler house, and he's going to move his family out and continue to the path of reconciliation. And and Andrea says, Kimmy says to him, "You know what? I like it here, and I'm not leaving." I can see that for that character. You know, she found strength in being in DJ's house. I mean, it was absolutely consistent with her character in the first version of the show, where she basically lived in the town or home, and it was always get up, Kimmy, and she's like, nope, I'm not leaving. So it would make sense that she would want to stay there now that she's embedded in the home. And they played off of that throughout season 3. You have the episode where he tries to bribe Ramona into coming to live with him or spend more time with him by building her a yogurt shop and a dance studio in the home, in her room. And then Kimmy buys her a pony, which, my first thought is, I thought you didn't have any money. How the fuck did you buy a pony? But you can't ask too many questions with this show. It starts making no sense. You sort of accept that there's a money tree somewhere that they pluck from. But I liked it. I continue to enjoy the interactions of those 3 actors, and their storyline was just fine. It doesn't really have any kind of natural conclusion to it. It just sort of, it's out there, they deal with it, and it just sort of stays out there, and there's no real conclusion to that story.
And we probably won't see one again. No, keep in mind, we were calling this our review of season 3. This is only season 3A. The second half of the season is going to be released in December, and that's another 9 episodes to total at 18. So certain things, no, we knew we weren't going to get a resolution on through this season, which makes it a little bit harder to judge as a whole on some of these things. But I think what you just hit on, we probably will never get a resolution to until the show ends.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, when Netflix says, all right, call it a day, folks, wrap this up, if they decide they're going to have the family live in one house together or send him off to Europe. I don't know. I don't know where they're going with this. But it'll be interesting to see. Those are the main points of the season. I don't have a whole lot else. I talked about this when we first started discussing this show. There are a couple of cringe-worthy parts to this. Though, as much as I enjoyed Cameron's acting in the bridal shop, where she has to act like a mannequin at one point, when CJ walks in and catches her, I had to fast forward through that. I was like, yeah. I mentioned this before, and it bears a little bit of discussion. I like the fact that they moved Kimmy's character on from she has to be Ramona's best friend. They did an entire episode where she goes overboard yet again, and she shows up at Ramona's laser tag date. And, there's this recognition of, hey, I'll always be your mother and I'll always love you, but I can't be on top of you all the time. And they didn't seem to go back to that again the rest of the season. She more or less left Ramona alone to do her own thing, and the Kimmy character was doing other things. She was dealing with the wedding and, just being there, being funny. And I like that they did that. Those are the only other points I wanted to mention. I'm going to go ahead and throw it to you for last words and burning desires.
I really think this season, for the minor complaints we've had against it, I think it definitely did move the show in a strong direction forward. The plot lines that were left unsolved going into season 3B are actually for the most part, very intriguing, and I want to see where they go. I give a lot of credit to the cast now, who've really gotten comfortable in their roles and the interplay they have with each other, where the show clearly has to rely less on bringing back the original adult cast for more than just an episode per character, we'll say. The show is maturing just as its young cast members are, and I think it's being done and handled really positively. Nothing's going to be perfect, but for what this show is supposed to be, I think it's hitting or exceeding its mark more often than not. I'm excited to see season 3 be in December. If we're to give letter grades to these seasons, I'd say this was the strongest one yet. I'd give it an A-.
All right. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm enjoying the show. I laughed, and I think, as I say a lot on Damn You Hollywood, comedy should make you laugh, and if they make you laugh, then it's successful, and that's really all I ask of these things: be entertaining and make me laugh. And I definitely giggled. I mean, there wasn't a breathless laugh moment in any of this, but I enjoyed what I was watching. I at no time was bored. Nor was I felt embarrassed to be watching it. So kudos to the folks at Netflix and Fuller House for continuing to make an entertaining show and not making more than maybe one or two sequences cringeworthy. Tomorrow night here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, Metal Hammer of Doom will review Arch Enemy: Will to Power, and Thursday, On Trial will be back. We, unfortunately, due to Hurricane Irma, were not able to do an On Trial for it. But I'm going to go ahead and plug the Red Letter Media is half in the bag, where they compared the new It to the old It. Good enough. I don't think I would have done a better job talking about it. So go listen to their show, and you can enjoy it if you really want to. Plus,
is Arch Enemy Does Arch Enemy have the really good-looking girl singer from Canada?
Correct. Who sounds a good dude.
Oh, God, she's incredible.
Yeah, she often gets voted as like the hottest woman in metal.
That girl from Lacuna Coil.
Yeah, Jesse's obsessed with her. I think that's the one hall pass Jesse makes mention of. But Thursday, it's the 15th anniversary of Ballistic, X versus Sever. That makes you feel old. Came out in 2002.
Yeesh.
It's the most rotten movie on Rotten Tomatoes, which means it has the highest number of reviews that have, and every single one of those reviews gave it a rotten score. So it's 0 on the tomato meter. And I thought, what better movie to put in the On Trial than Ballistic X vs. Sever, which I watched today, and it is actually not that bad. But we'll talk about it. Next week, we've got source material. We've got the DC Universe meets Hanna-Barbera, which we'll either do that one straight or we'll have Josh Calandros come on again, and we'll do like we did with the DC Warner Brothers books, where we have to,
to be fair, I liked Green Lantern Space Ghost.
Okay. I just got it in the mail today, so I'm going to read it. I'm very excited about Suicide Squad and the Banana Splits. That's the one I really want to read. Wednesday, October 4th, we're going to review Primus, the Desaturated 7. And there's not going to be a Tuesday show. Instead, we're going to move that to Thursday, October 5th. Another TV party we're going to do, since it's October, and October is all things Halloween. We're going to review Hannibal, Season 1, and that's going to be me and Robert Winfrey. As far as any other TV parties, we'll have Robert Winfrey and Robert Cooper on October 17th for Voltron Season 4, which is kind of like what they did with, exactly like what they did with Fuller House, where they took a long season and just cut it in half. This is the second half of basically Season 3, though they're calling it Season 4. However you like it, call it what you want. So Season 4 or Season 3.5 will be October 17th on a TV party. And in the month of November, we've got a TV party for Black Mirror Season 3, myself and Jesse Starcher. And in the month of December, we'll do a TV party for The Crown with Andrew Graham, friend of the show. So those are all my plugs for the time being. Pat, go ahead and plug whatever stuff you got going on.
Yeah, you can hear me normally on Sunday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network for the 411 Mania Ground and Pound radio show. You can hear me bag on all things UFC and MMA on that show regularly. And shout out to Paige Van Zandt more often than not. Nothing major in the works. I'm looking over a couple things that Mark and I'll pitch to Mark, and we'll see if we get on the network or not. He's always looking for content, so why not? Other than that, just thanks to everybody for listening in on Sundays and on our last few TV parties where I've had a lot of fun, and I hope you guys have too.
Did Jeff abandon that show, or are you two getting along enough,
no, Jeff,
well enough that you keep coming back?
Jeff is still very much a part of the show. Certain weeks he's not able to make it. It's just because he's at, WonderCon or some other major, media event happening in Southern California that he ends up going to cover. We still disagree pretty heavily more often than not. But nothing major. I think the last time I really put him on the spot and really had a strong disagreement with him was he kept saying Derek Lewis is a veteran as means to why he'll beat Mark Hunt. And I kept asking him, what does that mean? Somebody with 14 fights and that has lost all of them is a veteran. Tell me why you believe he'll beat Mark Hunt. Give me something I can work with. And didn't. And, we went on like that for a while. And Rob probably was pulling his hair out.
I was going to say, that sounds horrible. But no, I'm glad. I'm glad at least you two are able to coexist on the same show and it not end in tears. That makes me happy. It also makes me happy that you were here tonight. I always appreciate your insight. I enjoy talking television shows with you. We'll have to start coming up with the 2018 schedule. Figure out what else we want to talk about since we've finished a number of different shows. I finally finished Game of Thrones. I got all the way up through the undead dragon tearing down the wall. So
I'm very proud you caught up
when that finally comes out. Yes. I have. I for a while then, my wife was wondering. She was like, I accepted you not parenting when you were dealing with chemotherapy. You don't get a pass for not parenting your children to go watch Game of Thrones. And I said, sure, I do. But I have finally binge watched the entire series up until the season 7 finale. So in a year or so, whenever Game of Thrones season 8 comes out, I'll be right there to watch it as it comes out and. We'll do like we did with The Flash and some other ones where, when the finale hits, we'll talk about it. I'll actually be prepared to.
I'm happy you finally got to hear my favorite line of all time in the series where Tyrion and the Hound are walking towards the court of Cersei, and you hear the Hound say, whenever there's something bad going on, there's always a Lannister fucking behind it. And Tyrion has to reply, and there's always a Clegane cunt standing right behind them.
I tell you, I had a cheer out loud moment where after the Lannister army takes Highgarden, spoilers, after the Lannister army takes Highgarden and they're marching the supplies on the road, and they're attacked by the Dothraki and Emilia Clarke on the Daenerys on her dragon, and the dragon's just lighting up the entire fucking army. I mean, these poor bastards. I had a cheer at the television moment. I was like, yeah! Like, this is what I've been waiting for. Fuck them up. And they, and it's so funny because, I've heard, like, South Park make the jokes of the dragons are coming as if there were no dragons on the show. There's been dragons on the show since the end of season 1 in some form or fashion. And even season 6, I think, the dragons were lighting people up and eating them here and there. So I don't know where the complaints were of where are the dragons. There's been fucking dragons on the entire series. But it was fun to see her riding the dragon into a battle and lighting up the entire army and the caravan of supplies. I thought that was pretty hilarious. And those are my thoughts on Game of Thrones. So... All right, Pat, we're going to get out of here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight on TV Party Tonight. For Pat Mullin, I am your mandated reporter, Mr. Mark Radulich, and frankly, I enjoy dragons burning armies. Be well, be safe, and behave.